Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a Boeing 737 pilot and a member of PMDG's tech team. In today's video we're going to look at the Crosswind landings. And before we start going into the actual landing itself, let's quickly review a little bit of the theory. Boeing themselves demonstrated the 737NG up to 40 knots of crosswind. But there are, of course, as always, some limitations in place, depending on outside conditions. So 40 knots has only been demonstrated for runway condition codes of 5 and 6. So 6 is the former dry, 5 nowadays means good braking action. But when you have a good to medium braking action, the limit is 35, medium is 25, medium to poor 17, and poor braking action 15 knots. Note that most operators do not permit landing at braking action poor at all. Also be aware that you have to reduce the crosswind guidelines by 5 knots on wet or contaminated runways whenever asymmetric reverse thrust is used, so meaning when you basically have a thrust reverser inoperative. Next up, let's start looking at some further limitations. And there are two techniques of landing the airplane in crosswind. It's either touchdown in the crab angle, so without aligning the nose with the runway center line, or decrabbing during the flare. It is also possible to do a side slip only approach, however, at least in my operator, that's not permitted to do at all. So I will only review the two techniques, decrabbing during the flare and touching down in a crab. If you plan to do a side slip only landing, then you need to take into account some further crosswind limitations, because that is not recommended with a wind of more than 20 knots when using flaps 30 or more than 23 knots when using flaps 40. So, once again, another reason to choose between the decrab during flare or the touchdown in crab method. Now, what do the two methods mean? With a decrab during the flare, the objective of the technique is to maintain wings level throughout the approach, flare and touchdown, and on final approach a crab angle is established with the wings level to maintain the desired track. Just prior to touchdown, while flaring the airplane, downwind rudder is applied to eliminate the crab and align the airplane with the runway center line. Be aware that as rudder is applied, the upwind wing sweeps forward, developing a roll moment, so you will need to use some aileron again to keep the wings level on the touchdown. Again, that is very important. Keep in mind that with just 8 degrees of bank angle, your engine nacelle might already hit the ground. The other method is to land the airframe with a crab angle. So that means that you're basically not going to apply any rudder to align the nose with the center line before you touch down. So the touchdown happens with the crab angle still on. And looking at that method, be aware that touchdowns in a crab only condition is not recommended when landing on a dry runway in strong crosswinds. On very slippery runways, landing the airplane using crab only reduces the drift towards the downwind side at touchdown, and therefore permits rapid operation of the spoilers and auto brakes because all main gears touch down simultaneously, contrary to the decrab and flare method, where you aim to touch down with both gears simultaneously, but it often happens that you touch down with one gear first and then with the other. So, let's recap this. Decrab during the flare. That's mostly done if we have dry conditions, and it is a little bit more comfortable to the passengers as well. And it puts a little bit of less stress on the airplane. Touching down in a crab angle is the more effective way, especially on very slippery runways and on wet runways, because it makes directional control easier. One more thing to keep in mind. Let's switch our attention to the simulator now. Right now we have 54 knots of direct crosswind. So you can see over here that the crab angle of the airplane is around about 18 degrees. So if you're looking outside, looking for the runway, you'll have to look to either side to actually find it. So we are using the track app navigation display here. You can see the nose is pointing about 18 degrees further to the right into the wind. So when we're looking for the runway, we'll have to be looking somewhere over here rather than looking straight ahead. So that's something to keep in mind, especially if the visibility is bad like it is right here, flying through a rain shower. So all of this said and done. One more personal note here, that is, some pilots prefer using the autopilot all the way down to the minimums with strong crosswinds and then disengaging and flying it down to the runway. That certainly bears the advantage that the autopilot is mainly steering the airplane, so you are monitoring the autopilot, but it enables you to sit back a little bit and take the bigger picture. While I have to say that I personally much prefer to have early control of the airplane to get the hands-on feeling of the airplane on the approach. And that enables me personally just to get the feeling a bit earlier and to, in my opinion, do better landings. But that comes down to personal technique. Just go and practice for yourself, see what you like the most. So, all of this said and done, let's finally start flying. We are on final approach to Edinburgh's runway 24, Scotland. Where else would you find such a strong wind zone? And we have some occasional rain showers every now and then, but the main situation here is clouds overcast 1500 feet, and the wind is coming from 330 degrees, 30 knots, gusting 33 knots, so right at the maximum that we can do with the airplane. So, all of this said and done, let's go flying. We are basically configured for landing except for the gear and flaps. Once again, when you are hand flying the airplane, the flight director gives you some great guidance in tracking localizer and glide slope, so I can very much recommend you, if you are learning to fly the airplane, use the flight director. Right, we still don't see anything. Let's go gear down, flap 15. Barely coming down, flaps 25 to aid it in the deceleration a bit. And flaps 30. Since all of the wind is crosswind, we can use VREF +5 for our final approach. Checked. So there we see the approach lights at the left.
Plus 100.
Checked.
Minimums.
Continue.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
So see how easily the wind might start pushing you over. So it's very important that you start regaining the center line as early as you can. And once again you see how much aileron are needed initially in order to keep the wings level. So that's once again also something to keep in mind. So, you see, the runway was wet, so we touched down in the crab angle, and then straight away after landing we had to use the rudder to align the nose with the center line. And you see how easily the wind started drifting us over towards the runway edge. So it's important that you apply the rudder quickly and effectively. And if the rudder alone is not sufficient to help you, you can also modulate the thrust reverses. So if the wind is pushing towards the downwind side and the nose is still pointing into the wind, then you can reduce the reverse thrust. And that is going to aid with the directional control, because with the nose showing into the wind, a part of the reverse thrust is also going to pull you sideways into the downwind side. Alright, so I hope that you have enjoyed this video. I hope that you learned something from it. Doing a crosswind landing, especially with maximum crosswind conditions, is something very challenging. In fact, it is something that in my airline new first officers, until they've collected their first 500 hours, are not even allowed to do. And you have seen on this very landing how easily we've been pulled over to the right hand side there, and how hard it was to actually get the airplane back to the center line. So be prepared for it, anticipate it happening, and then action when you see it happening. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you found this tutorial helpful, and I'm looking forward to see you all on the next one.